Friends, Nilsi here. So last Wednesday, our friend Susan asked us a question, and I started typing the answer, but it was very long. So hopefully I can keep this video brief. So let's dive into it. I'm going to share my screen with you so we can talk about the text. All right, so Susan's question was, hey, Jesus said, truly, I tell you, this generation will certainly not pass away until all these things have happened. And then he turns around and says, well, nobody knows the day or the hour when those things will happen. So what is Jesus talking about? Which one is it, Jesus? Will the generations not pass away, or no one knows the time? So one of the ways that we can start to interpret scripture, and you can use this technique in other texts as well, is we look at what comes before, what is before that specific verse. So let's go to the beginning of chapter 24 and see what the chapter is about. So right up here, the title of the passage is The Destruction of the Temple and Signs of the End Times. So the passage begins with Jesus talking to his disciples, and they were looking at buildings. We don't know what they said, but it was pretty much about the nice and big buildings that were around them. So then Jesus turns and says, do you see all these things? He asked. Truly, I tell you, not one stone here will be left on another. Everyone will be thrown down. So then as Jesus, verse 3, as Jesus was sitting on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. And then they asked, and notice that this is a two-part question. The first part of the question is, tell us, they said, when will this happen? Now, what is the this? What are they asking? They're talking about the destruction of the temple. Tell us, Jesus, when will the destruction of the temple happen? Now imagine that was something almost unimaginable, that something would happen to such a nice structure, right? So then the second part of the question is, and what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age? So they asked two questions. When will the destruction of the temple happen? And what are the signs of your coming? So then starting verse 4, Jesus is talking about the signs and what you look for, what's going to happen. So most scholars believe that up until verse 35, Jesus is talking about the first part of the question, when the destruction of the temple will happen. I know it can get a little tricky because, for instance, in verse 30, he starts to talk about signs of the Son of Man in heaven. So the two questions are sort of mixed in there, but the agreement is that when Jesus says this generation will not pass away, he's talking about the destruction of the temple and not about his second coming. So let's take a look at what Wesley said. Wesley did a commentary on the Bible. And while he was not a huge theologian, he has a lot of very useful comments on the Bible. So he says on verse 34, this is what Wesley believes that verse 34 means. He says, just this generation of men now living shall not pass till all these things be done. The expression implies that great part of that generation will be passed away, but not the whole. Just so it was. For the city and temple were destroyed 39 or 40 years later. So John Wesley, again, believes that Jesus is talking about the destruction of the temple when he talks about the generations will not pass away. Another thing to pay attention to is that between verse 35 and 36, there's no other prompting. So it's very feasible to believe that on starting verse 36, that's when Jesus is talking about the second coming. He's answering the second part of the question, because here solely he is talking about the second coming and what you look for. Then some scholars also might believe that if it is somebody's understanding that verse 34 does refer to the second coming, then that person is believing that Jesus was incorrect because his second coming did not happen at the end of that generation, right? So we believe that verse 34, when he's talking about this generation will not pass away, he's referring specifically to the destruction of the temple, which was the first part of the question. I hope this was helpful. Love you all and see you soon. Bye-bye.